Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Southern Way. I'm your host, Mike Mitchell, and today I'm here in Warren County, North Carolina, site of a very unusual experiment in federal housing policy. You see, on these 5,000 acres, developers hope to build a vibrant and self-sustaining community, a planned utopia they called Soul City, North Carolina. But it didn't quite work out that way, for while Soul City does exist, the reality of today doesn't quite match with the original vision. Watch. It was the late 1960s, a time of enormous societal change in the United States. Federal housing policy often reflected the larger social trends with which the nation was struggling. Public housing developments, especially in urban areas, were dominated by huge complexes. Meanwhile, across much of the South, the housing needs of the most needy were often going ignored. Consensus across both parties began to emerge that there needed to be a better way to address the nation's housing needs. So, in 1970, Congress passed the Urban Growth and New Community Development Act to try to address these housing issues. In short, the law gave the Department of Housing and Urban Development the ability to support private real estate developers in the creation of innovative new towns across the country. 14 of these new towns were established under the new law in locations such as Minnesota, New York, Arkansas, Illinois, Texas, and Maryland. This new federal program caught the attention of Floyd McKissick. Mr. McKissick wanted to create one of these new towns in his home state of North Carolina.
The state of North Carolina will benefit economically by having a project like this. A project like this appeals to the self-interest of people. It opens thousands of opportunities, not just full employment, but upward mobility to employment, to agree with the psychological man and his ego to a great extent. It rather than throwing people together in a tightly competitive society where there are only 4 or 5 leadership roles, Soul City opens up thousands of leadership roles as compared to that.
At this point in his career, Floyd McKissick was already a pioneer in many respects. Born in Asheville, North Carolina, he became the first black student admitted to the University of North Carolina's Chapel Hill Law School. In 1966, he became the leader of CORE, the Congress for Racial Equality. By many accounts, McKissick turned CORE into a more radical organization. Now, what happens next is key. In 1968, Floyd McKissick stepped down as the leader of CORE so that he could focus on his new idea, the creation of a community called Soul City. McKissick then announced his endorsement of Republican Richard Nixon in his campaign for president. That campaign endorsement paid off. After Congress passed the New Towns Law, President Nixon announced his support for the Soul City project, and under his direction, HUD gave $14 million of federal support to Floyd McKissick's community. McKissick selected Warren County as the site for his new community. The master plan for Soul City called for 3 villages that would house up to 18,000 residents. The community was organized to be self-contained and self-sustaining. Residents could work, learn, worship, and play within its borders. A common misconception about Soul City was that it was built primarily as a community for African Americans. To the contrary, Floyd McKissick envisioned his creation as a place where all races would live in harmony.
In fact, if it succeeded as an all-black town, it would be defeating one of my objectives, because I believe that the force of the Newtown concept is a strong socio-political economic force that deals with every rangeable problem that we have in American society. We can focus it on one, and we can bring together, the private sector. You can bring together industry, government, and educational resources to really build a town free of racism.
Unfortunately, this is what most of Soul City looks like today. Abandoned cul-de-sacs with no finished development. Today, about 150 residents call Soul City home. Most live in single-family homes, with some living in a small apartment complex located within the city. Most of the areas designated for retail shops sit empty and abandoned. The development company building the community went into foreclosure in 1979, although a few new homes have been constructed more recently. There is one Baptist congregation still holding services within the city's limits, and the city still maintains a park area for its residents. Within Soul City today, you can still see signs of the original vision. The street signs and subdivision entrances offer glimpses of what Soul City might have become. The lone industrial building, called Soul Tech 1, built to provide employment to residents, has since been sold to the county and converted into a prison. It's easy to view Soul City, North Carolina as a failure. After all, its reality today bears little resemblance to the original vision. But perhaps that's taking too simplistic a view. You see, if you look more closely at Soul City, you can see that many of its ideas are taking root in community development projects underway today. So perhaps the vision of Soul City was just too far ahead of its time, or perhaps Soul City just violated that cardinal rule of real estate: location, location, location. One thing is certain. If you're ever in Warren County on the North Carolina-Virginia border, a quick drive through Soul City is definitely worth your time. So visit us again for another fascinating exploration of the American South. See you next time.